In clinical psychology, there's a persistent assumption about stress that acute physiological arousal, the rapid heartbeat, shallow breath, dilated pupil, signifies cognitive damage. When the autonomic nervous system detects a threat, it triggers a sympathetic response. The most reliable biological marker is a spike in heart rate, prepping the body for immediate action. But recent data from embodied cognition research reveals a paradox. Under the right conditions, subjects can endure severe autonomic arousal, racing hearts and elevated blood pressure, while reporting a substantial reduction in their subjective experience of anxiety. There is a mechanical gap between the body physically preparing for a threat and the mind consciously experiencing that state as panic. This research suggests that behavioral interventions do not function by silencing the nervous system. Instead, they trigger a top-down cortical reappraisal that fundamentally restructures how neural networks process that arousal. If this thesis holds, then eliminating stress is the wrong biological goal for optimizing cognitive function. The focus shifts instead to how that arousal is directed. To observe this mechanism at work, researchers utilized the simulated public speaking test. Subjects are given exactly 3 minutes to prepare a speech, which they must then deliver to a panel of unsmiling neutral evaluators to induce acute anticipatory stress. The control group was prepped with traditional anxiety management. They used breathing exercises specifically designed to force the body out of its sympathetic response and back into a relaxed, low-arousal state. The experimental group underwent the Corp Oral program. Instead of calming down, they used embodied redirection. By taking spatial ownership, adopting expansive postures, and using expressive gestures, they successfully channeled all of their nervous energy. During the speech phase, this chart shows both groups maintaining elevated heart rate plateaus above 80 beats per minute. But when we overlay self-perceived anxiety data, the control group's panic stays high, while the experimental group sees a steep 33% drop. Their bodies were still highly agitated, but their brains had successfully relabeled the physiological state. They converted the physical sensation of a threat into the biological state of a challenge. The experimental group achieved active cognitive control over their experience, proving that overcoming anxiety does not require physiological calm. To understand how the mind can decouple from the heart, we have to look directly at the cortex. During the speech phase of the experiment, researchers mapped the subject's cortical activity using EEG to measure spectral power across different brain frequencies. This topographical map shows the spectral power distribution across the scalp. In the experimental group, there is a distinct increase in delta, theta, and beta band frequencies, concentrated heavily in the right frontocentral and parietal regions. The most critical signal originates here, at the parietal medial cortex, an electrode position designated as PZ. PZ activation indicates a high level of conscious error control. It is the exact region where the brain integrates an internal awareness of the body's physical schema with incoming stimuli from the external environment. This is the neurological signature of active sensory-motor embodiment. The brain is not being passively flooded by emotional panic. It is meticulously monitoring and directing the physical body in real time. A surge in targeted cortical activation is a biological requirement to harness acute physical arousal and direct it toward a specific task. We can quantify this shift using a biomarker called frontal alpha asymmetry, which measures whether a brain is preparing for approach behavior or avoidance behavior, activity of that region. The right frontal region of the brain is responsible for managing avoidance, defensive withdrawal, and negative motivation. We calculate the balance of power using this equation, the natural log of the right frontal node, F4, minus the left, F3. By increasing alpha frequency specifically on the right side, the brain actively suppresses its own defensive withdrawal instinct. The inhibition on the right allows the left hemisphere's approach-oriented processing to dominate. This is exactly what occurred in the experimental group. Their frontal alpha asymmetry values increased, marking a definitive neurological shift out of a defensive posture and into an active approach state. Using expansive posture and deliberate gesture, they employed top-down cognitive control to ride the wave of their own autonomic arousal, rather than attempting to retreat from it. Deliberate behavioral choices physically alter cortical processing. They rewrite the neural algorithms to convert a perceived threat into an engaging, manageable challenge. This deliberate top-down regulation impacts the brain's long-term physical structure well beyond the performance of a single speech. The ideal catalyst for neuroplasticity is not absolute calm. It is the combination of moderate physiological arousal paired with intense social and environmental attunement. To continuously restructure and reinforce neural pathways, the brain must regularly encounter states of arousal and successfully manage them through cognitive reappraisal. Without this stimulation, neural networks undergo passive degradation. A chronic low arousal or socially isolated state removes the physical stress needed to trigger new synaptic growth. We can see the ultimate consequence of this mechanism by looking at longitudinal epidemiological data, which connects our daily behavioral engagement directly to physical brain protection in old age. Encountering and actively reappraising stress is a biological prerequisite for maintaining long-term neurological health. A longitudinal study out of Rush University tracked 1,923 older adults over an average of 7 years, mapping their daily social behaviors against their cognitive decline. The researchers monitored engagement in activities with high social and spatial demands, ranging from public community volunteer work to frequent interpersonal socialization and global travel. This graph tracks these behaviors against neural network efficiency. Continuous engagement in complex environments forces the brain to repeatedly execute top-down regulatory loops, structurally thickening the cortex over decades. This lifelong cumulative outcome is known as cognitive reserve. Its clinical impact is highly quantifiable. The individuals with the highest levels of social engagement delayed the clinical onset of dementia by an average of 5 full years compared to their least engaged peers. This physical delay functions effectively even if the brain is suffering from underlying physical pathology or cerebrovascular atrophy. The density of the network acts as a buffer against the disease. Forging these denser neural networks requires physical, embodied, and social engagement. You have to use the hardware to protect the hardware. Behavioral and social strategies provide the structural framework for lifelong neuroprotection. By engaging the mind as a social organ, we dictate the long-term architecture of the brain.